Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Dr. Sneha Krishnan. I'm an associate professor at Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability at Jindal Global University. Today, we are here to welcome our new batch of students from 2021. And we have the honor of hosting Dr. Pankaj Seksharia, whom I know because I've read his books, and I'm really excited that he agreed to be with us here today, not physically, but virtually. We have an esteemed lineup of speakers today, and without taking much time, I just want to give a brief introduction of Dr. Pankaj here. He is the author of 5 books on Andaman and Nicobar Islands. He's done extensive years of experience of journalism in the islands, trying to understand the ecology, the history, and the people of the place in his book, Islands in Flux, the Andaman and Nicobar Story, published by Harper's. It actually describes his work over the last 20 years. And recently, I think 2 days back, his first book, Children, called Waiting for Turtles by Karadi Tales, was launched. He actually has a bachelor's degree in engineering, but went on to do master's in mass communication and recently completed his PhD in science and technology studies in the Netherlands. He's currently associate professor at SITA in IIT Bombay, but is also associated with the environmental group Kalpavich, which many of us are familiar with. And his books actually also talk about technology. They are published in different journals and also intimately describe nanotechnology and how science and technology within India are developing and what is the scope in the coming years. So I would encourage all of you to, after listening to his talk, go and explore his books as well. Professor Pankaj, thank you so much for taking out time from your busy schedule today. And without much further ado, I would pass on to Professor Raj to just give his welcome remarks. Thank you, Professor Raj.
Thank you very much, Sneha. What a pleasure to see all of you. And I just want to take this moment to welcome the new batch of students who have joined the BA Honors in Environmental Studies at the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability. I also want to particularly welcome them and extend my heartiest congratulations for a number of reasons. I know that the last year has been extremely difficult and challenging. All of you must have completed your high school studies, mostly online, and then would have completed the examinations. And then, as if that was not enough, would have taken another online entrance examinations to be admitted to the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability, hardly have taken a vacation or a break. And here you are, beginning the new academic session. So I must say that you have demonstrated a lot of resilience, a sincere commitment and dedication to the larger project of learning and discovery. So I really want to take this moment to congratulate each one of you, including your parents and others who contributed to this stage of your life where you have reached. I also want to welcome the students who are already part of the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability, who may be joining us to be able to witness this commencement lecture. I also want to welcome the faculty members of the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability, both on my behalf as well as the Dean of the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability, Professor Dr. Armin Rosenkrantz. It's such a pleasure to have Professor Dr. Pankaj Seksharia, part of the, somebody who will be delivering our commencement lecture today. And I briefly had a look at his bio and his extraordinary journey as somebody who did spend maybe a week to 10 days in Andaman and Nicobar Islands many years ago. I can, what he has done in terms of his work and research and writing, it resonates with me. I also note that I really want to pay tribute to one of his organizations. I had known Ashish Kotari from another life before, and one of the founders of Kalpavich. So there are so many ways by which his talk and his commencement lecture today is going to impact, hopefully, the students who are entering into the portals of an academic institution to study the environment. I also want to recognize the fact that his research work has identified very substantive issues that may not receive the kind of public attention, nevertheless has a very profound impact on the fragile environment that all of us are living. And that makes the work even more significant. And I'm grateful to him for actually accepting our invitation and to be part of today's commencement lecture. As Sneha had introduced Dr. Pankaj, I think one of the things that Dr. Pankaj has done is that he combined his own past experience of being a journalist as to somebody who observes society and the environment, but then he has combined a rich and a rigorous approach towards research and evidence seeking in the form of the books that he has written, and so that makes it quite interesting. I also think that the young students of the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability who are beginning their academic studies in the field of environment, these are the areas that might be of great interest to you. It may not be, it shows also how much there is diversity in the discipline of environment. I think it's only fair to say that there is so much of potential in this field, and there is so much of interdisciplinary work that can be pursued, connecting science and technology and sustainability and issues relating to rehabilitation. So many of these issues have overlapping influences, and I'm keen to hear the lecture itself. So I want to once again thank Dr. Pankaj Seksaria for accepting our invitation and to be able to deliver this commencement lecture. For all the students who are joining OP Jindal Global University, I can only say that this is the fantastic time to be part of the institution. OP Jindal Global University was recently ranked last couple of years as India's first ranked private university by the QS World University Rankings. And there are many other things that has happened, but most importantly, the OP Jindal Global University was declared as an institution of eminence by the Government of India, one of only 10 public and 10 private universities given the status. We're the only non-STEM and non-medicine university in the entire list of 10 public and 10 private universities to have been conferred the status of an institution of eminence. It comes with us a lot of responsibility, but more importantly, to have freedom and flexibility to pursue a range of innovative programs, interdisciplinary programs that are relevant for every discipline, including the broader discipline of environment and sustainability. With those words, once again, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to this, what promises to be a fantastic commencement lecture on the theme at the tri-junction of fragility and vulnerability, the Andaman and Nicobar story by Professor Dr. Pankaj Seksaria, author and professor at the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai. Over to you, Professor Seksaria.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your very generous introduction, Professor Raj. And I must say, I'm very honored and that all of you thought it right to invite me. I hope I can do justice to this opportunity. Also, thanks to the other members on the panel here, Cosman, Professor Sridhar, and of course, Sneha, who well, didn't arm twist me, but somehow cajoled me into agreeing. Well, I've never given a commencement lecture before, so I don't know what it means. And then I just resolved to say, okay, I'll just do the same old thing that I do. And this is a talk I've been actually giving a number of times over the last couple of years. So there is a chance some of you may have watched it or heard it. So then you can log off because it's the same old thing. But for me, it has been a... So I've worked in the Andamans for the last 25 years. I started working there when I was finishing my engineering. And what I'm going to present today, and I'm going to dive straight into the talk and kind of share with you my learnings, my understanding. What I'm trying to what I'm going to try and present to you is an understanding that I have developed over 25 years of working in that place. And I might just kind of take the liberty of being a graying old man and give more advice to students who are fed up of advice with all of us old men. is that a continuation along a track of work or a geography is very essential to develop credibility and an understanding of that place. It takes time to understand anything that we are doing, and we are in an age where there's a lot of distraction for all of us. And I have a young son who's about half the age of people who are joining today, just 11. And I know how much of a challenge it is because there's so many distractions. But the challenge for all of us is to keep that track of engagement. And what I want to say is that I get invited to speak here today because I might have something to say about these islands. And that only happens because I have kind of hung on to that thread, that theme, that geography, where if I go back to a place for 25 years, I see changes happening. I understand it in a way that no modern technology, no big data, no listening to somebody who understands can actually give you. So that first-hand experience and engagement and commitment to a thread, I think, is very, very important. And it becomes particularly so, I think, in the field of environment and sustainability, because the timeline in which we are looking at the world, in our world, is only a blink of the eye in the larger time span, and a lot more changes than we think it actually does, and that's why it's very important. And that is actually the story I want to tell you about the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And let me try and share my screen, and hopefully it will. Oh, I already can't see it. Just give me a moment. Just a moment. I had it up just here, and it is okay. I'm sorry, just a moment. Yeah.
If you want to run a few slides back, Pankaj. Yeah.
Can you see the first slide?
Yes.
And is it moving?
Yes.
All right, great. Yeah, so sorry for that little glitch. So this is the story at the tri-junction of fragility and vulnerability. You probably got the abstract, the story of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And very recently when I was making this talk, it suddenly struck me. I could even call it thinking like the islands. I mean, what does it mean to think like the island? What does it mean to think like a river? What does it mean to think like a tree? Is it possible? It's too anthropocentric. It is thinking about how humans would think. But what if you were an island? What is it that you want? How would you look at the world? And why I say that is important, and I'll come to that point. But let me start in that sense, the very beginning. This tri-junction of fragility and vulnerability, I will try and narrate a story of a general tri-junction of fragility and vulnerability, but through the story of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, because that is the story I know. And this idea of the tri-junction emerged for me, like I mentioned in the beginning, over 20 years of work. More recently, when I was putting together this book that Sneha mentioned, which is Islands in Flux, the story of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which is a collection of about 20 years of my journalism. And when I was thinking for a title, what struck me the most is the idea of change and of flux. So we have this kind of very well-known, statement in English which says that the only thing that is constant is change, and nothing else really matters because there's a constant flux. And I realized that when I look at the islands, I realized that at multiple levels, geological, ecological, socio-cultural, there's constant change and flux that has happened. And I thought that would capture the story very well. And what are the three changes, the three junctions, as it were, the tri-junctions, are represented on the right-hand side of the screen with the three pictures. And the three axes of this junction are the geological, are the ecological, and the socio-cultural. And let me also mention this here, like I said in the beginning, that over the last 2 years, I have been trying to formulate this proposition of our planet, of our systems, being at the tri-junction of these three very prominent elements: the geological, the ecological, and the socio-cultural. And this is open for discussion and debate. It is open for you to pick it up as an idea and throw it out of the window, pick it up as an idea and run with it, and get back to me or do what you want with it. So what I want to say is that the world that we are part of, the system that we are part of, in some ways can be understood or can be articulated as being constituted by these three elements. The fundamentals of our existence, as it were. So if one looks at the geology, so one can look at it in terms of time. What came first? So there was the geology of the planet before there was any life. The brick and mortar, as it were, of the planet, the cement and the lime and the bricks that make a structure. You have the gradients, you have the water flows, you have mountains. Now, much later, after the planet was itself created by factors we still don't understand, life came to be upon Earth, and that is the ecology. So depending on the winds and the soils and the waters and the flows and the altitude and the, etc., we have unique ecologies. Now, what is important to keep in mind is that this is the diversity that the planet is made of. So we all know that ecologies, we have multiple ecologies on the planet. So where you are sitting in Sonepat, in the North Indian plains, is very different from where I am sitting on the coastline of Mumbai, which is very different from another coastline that we are going to talk about, which is the Andamans, which is very different from the Himalayas, which is very different from the deserts of Rajasthan, etc., etc., etc. The point I want to make is that the geology influences the ecology, because we know that the water, the climate, the temperatures will decide what kind of forests will grow and what kind of creatures will survive over there. And based on the ecology and the geology is the evolution of human cultures, right? Today, all of us in this class, perhaps men, all of us are wearing shirts and pants. Women perhaps are a little more diverse in the way they dress. But if we went back just about 2 generations, all of us, if we looked at our dada dadis and our grandparents, you will realize that each one of them came from a certain ecology, and you will see that the diversity of the ecology also influences the diversity of human cultures. So the kind of food people ate, or still eat as a matter of fact, the kind of houses people made, the kinds of dresses people wore, the kind of languages people spoke, are all influenced by many factors, but very centrally by the geological and ecological dimensions. And this is very, very central to keep in mind. This is what makes up the diversity. And this is particularly important in the Indian context, because I don't think there is any other part of the world, the South Asian subcontinent, the Indian subcontinent, where there are more people and more diversity and more richness in that small packet of land called South Asia than there is anywhere else on the planet. And so one can look at it in a temporal manner along the line of time, the geology, the ecology, and the diversity of human cultures, socio-cultural factors. The other interesting way to look at it might be like the 3 legs of a tripod. If you can see my hand here, we know that for a tripod to be stable and without moving, the 3 legs need to be in balance. That's how a tripod stands. The moment we upset even one leg, the tripod collapses. And if one takes that analogy to say that if we intervene in the development process, either in the geological realm or in the ecological realm or in the socio-cultural realm, without realizing or without acknowledging that each are interlinked and each will have a very solid impact, we are going to cause the collapse of systems. And the Anthropocene, which some of you may have heard and which I'm sure will come up in your classes in the next 3 years, is a very important manifestation of the impacts that human beings have created on the planet today. Yeah, I will give you examples of the Andamans, but in recent days, if you have been watching some of the videos that are coming out of the Himalayas, of Himachal, of Kinnaur, of what's happening in Uttarakhand, entire mountain sides collapsing into the valleys, it is because of huge amount of human intervention that has come about in the geology of the place. Yeah, and that impacts the forest, that impacts the rivers, etc., etc. But the point I want to make is that this is the trijunction of fragility, which all ecosystems are fragile. Whether it's the Ganga, it's the northern Indian plains, whether it's the Himalayas, whether it's the Western Ghats. And if we don't acknowledge this centrality of the balance, if we don't acknowledge the fragility, we will end up creating more vulnerability. We will put ourselves into more situations of danger, because mountains will collapse, dams will collapse, the climate is changing, crops will fail, and who knows, that's what a lot of people are arguing, that the pandemic that we are facing today, it may not have been created by the system that we are part of, but perhaps has been influenced and pushed ahead by that system. So let it not be a doomsday story, but it's important to keep in mind that this is a very, very fragile balance. And we are like a blink in the timeline of the planet, which has been there for millions of years. Even in the in the blink in the timeline of life on the planet, we have come much later. Creatures that live on the planet today have been around for 150 million years, and we'll talk of one in the course of the talk. So we have to be aware of that reality, and we have to be very sensitive to that reality. And that's the story I'm going to tell you. I'm going to try and convince you how and why that is important through the story of the Andaman Islands. And it is a story that you can then take ahead and make up or challenge for other ecosystems that you are part of. Yeah. So, like I mentioned, it came about when I was doing this book, Islands in Flux. It's a story, it is a book that has about 40 different articles, newspaper articles, and some academic work for like the EPW and Indian birds that talks about various dimensions of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So quickly jumping on, I'm guessing all of you have an idea of the geography that we're talking about. Hopefully you can see the arrow moving on the map. Here is the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. This is the eastern coastline of India. We have Madras, Chennai, we have Visakhapatnam, we have Calcutta. And of course, where I am sitting is not visible, and where you're sitting, at least where the university is sitting, is not visible on this map. So it's very evident that the Andaman and Nicobar are far away from mainland India. It's actually an accident of history, which sometimes, people of certain disposition don't like to hear or don't like to be said. It is not our right that the islands belong to us. It's an accident of history where some of you are aware the cellular jail was set up by the British, and because it was a penal colony of the British, it became part of independent India in 47. It's a very interesting place. It's really tiny. Yeah? It's really like, if there are Tamil speakers, kutti places, really tiny places where you might not even see them on a zoomed out map. And you can see how small they are in relation, say, to mainland India, even to the island nation of Sri Lanka. So you have, but very interesting. It is largely part of Southeast Asia, both physically, geographically, and biogeographically. These are the peaks of a submerged mountain range known as Arakanyoma that come in an arc from Burma in the north, Myanmar in the north, to Sumatra in the south. And what we have as the islands are actually just what juts out of that ocean island mountain system. So the islands actually are very, very rocky because you're on top of a mountain. I often kind of allude to them as being in Port Blair, which is the capital city, is like being in a real life giant roller coaster. You're going up and down all the time because you are on the top of a mountain. And in that sense, these are very different island systems from, say, the Maldives or Lakshadweep, which are coral islands, which actually have emerged from the ocean by the creation of coral. Here it's very different kind of thing. So you perhaps, I don't know how much of you remember the geography, but this is about 7 degrees north latitude is the southernmost tip of mainland India, which is Kanyakumari. And you have about half a degree south of Kanyakumari is Great Nicobar Island, which is the southernmost. So that is the southernmost tip of political India is in these Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Now, what is, many things can be said about that, but I will kind of move ahead. I would like to draw your attention to the star at the bottom of this map over here. And at least the class is not on Zoom, or we could have kind of stopped and asked this question. I'll just kind of ask the question and give you the answer. This star is a very important marker in the modern history, in the very, very modern history of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and which became a pivot for all of us to understand or re-understand these islands. This is the epicenter of the earthquake of December 2004. And I'm kind of guessing that maybe the class which has just joined is just about as old as that tsunami of December 2004. I don't know what year you all were born in, and we can have this chat, and maybe Sneha can tell me. Do we have people that were born in 2004, or is it the batch of 2004? Or how old would they? Anyway, we can make those calculations, but I'm sure you've heard of the earthquake and tsunami of 2004. So this happened actually just off Sumatra, which is only about 150 kilometers or 100 nautical miles from the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And if you read up or if you know about the damage that was caused in all over the world because of the tsunami, you will be astounded. I mean, lakhs of people died, property worth billions of dollars was destroyed. In some senses, those parts that were affected by the tsunami and the earthquake changed forever. And you all know that tsunamis happen because of earthquakes, and that earthquake happened actually in the Andaman and Nicobar waters. And that's a very important part of the geology I mentioned of those three axes. Just a quick close-up of that map, the same in relief. There's a 10-degree north latitude that separates the Andamans from the Nicobars. It's known as the 10-degree channel. You can see Banda Aceh here. So it was off the coast of Banda Aceh that this tsunami happened. Here you can see it's a small place, 8,000 square kilometers, total population of only 5 lakh people. Maybe that's less than the total population of Sonepat and around where the university is located. So a small place, there are about 550 to 600 islands, right from 1,000 square kilometers in areas to really like half a square kilometer in area. Most of the islands are not inhabited. There are no human populations. Only 35 islands are inhabited of the 550. And the biggest constraint, interestingly and not surprisingly, is water. So islands that don't have fresh water don't have human settlements for obvious reasons. I want to give you a quick snapshot of those three axes I spoke about, of ecology, of geology, and of the socio-cultural context. Very, very briefly, each one can be lectures and multiple lectures and subjects for PhD theses over and over again. I will also, I forgot to mention, but in line with what both Professor Raj said and what Sneha said, I also want to try and jump fields and domains to kind of bring in my experiences from journalism, from language, from understanding the relationship between society and technology. So it will not just be a talk on the islands, but we'll try and see if we can link up other dimensions. But here is a classical example of a tropical rainforest. You can see how beautifully rich and lush it is. So if any of you are interested in ecology per se, as bird watchers, as people interested in herbs, snakes, and I'm assuming many of you would be if you've joined this particular school and you've not joined the business school or the media school or public policy, this is a great place to work. Yeah, all our places are fantastic in terms of biodiversity, of bird life, animal life, plant life, etc., etc. But places like this kind of stand out in their own way. And here you see a fantastic example. And you see, you can see the gradient. This is the top of a mountain, as it were. So right from the ocean, you quickly go up the gradient. You can see the mangroves here at low tide. You can see the low tide. You see mangroves, which is the first kind of wall between land and sea. You see a type of forest which is dark green here, which are called the littoral forest. Littoral basically means at the sea level. There's a particular species here called the pandanus, or the screw pine, or what is locally called the kevda. And then you see at the top of the forest, you see these white trees kind of shooting through. This is a particular species known as gyptocarps, or the gurgeon species, which is quite spectacular, but it was also a very important part of the timber industry in these islands. And they make for very good plywood. And I don't know how many of you know how plywood is made, but if you go home and check out anything that is made of plywood, you will see that plywood is made of multiple sheets of timber. So actually, plywood is basically thin sheets of timber that are, it's almost like sheets of paper that are then put together and glued together. So what they do is that the tree is cut, it is put on a machine in the workshop, which is called a lathe, and then they turn the log and they scrape off thin layers of wood. And then these thin layers are glued together. That's how we get plywood. So this timber species is particularly good for that because it's not too hard and is not too soft. So, and that's another story of what happened with the forestry, but this is the forest that we are kind of talking about. Just a quick example of a mangrove forest. I'm hoping that in your school books, you studied about mangroves. It's one of the most fascinating families of the plant life. It grows along the coast. It is like the first wall, like I mentioned, between the coast and land. And it's a very, very challenging ecosystem to live in. So just think about it. You live part of time in water and part of time outside of water, because when the tides rise, mangroves get submerged, the coastal land gets submerged, and when the tides withdraw, the land is exposed. So you're half the time in water, half the time in land. This is not sweet water, this is saline water, this is salty water. You have high winds, You have the action of the sea waves. You have pressures from the land side because silt is coming, soil is coming in. It's a very dynamic system. And what the mangroves have done, very fascinatingly, have developed very large number of adaptations to be able to survive in that particular ecosystem. And again, if I remember my school science, which was like donkeys and donkeys years ago, I think we had some lessons in botany and the speciality of mangroves. And maybe Sneha can confirm, or maybe Sneha also needs to brush up her botany because she's going to be teaching this class. We had waxy leaves that prevent transpiration and loss of water. We have vivipary, or is it ovipary, where the seed starts to germinate on the plant. And you have a very excellent example here in this particular picture of what are called breathing roots. So, interestingly, because the soil is full of water, there is no air in the soil. And plants also need to breathe, of course, and roots help plants breathe. So we have here what are known as breathing roots or pneumatophores. You can see these sticks that are standing out of the water or the soil are actually roots that are growing opposite to gravity. They're growing towards the sun. We always believe that roots grow towards gravity, but here we have roots growing against gravity. And they're actually, they're very, if you ever manage to go to the coastline and see something like this, you will see they're very soft and fluffy and they're full of air. So they're actually meant to help the plant breathe. So there are many, many, many interesting adaptations that they do. They're very important for marine life. They are nurseries for fisheries. Small creatures get nutrition here, they get protection here. So millions of people who depend on the coastline for fisheries for their livelihoods, millions of people who love fish, who depend on fish for their protein and their food, depend on systems like mangroves and coral reefs, because this is where that life gets renewal. That's where the next generation of life comes about. So that's very, very important from that point. Okay. Any guesses what this is? Would you believe me if I said this was a battle tank that has been driven down the beach? And somebody would ask, what happened to the battle tank after it went into the sea? This is a tractor, and it would be fantastic to have had all the participants on Zoom and get answers. A lot of people do believe that this is a vehicle or a tractor that's gone down the beach, but these are the tracks of one of the most fascinating creatures that inhabits this planet. This incidentally is called. This is, by the way, the track of a turtle, a marine turtle, a turtle known in the local language in the Andaman and Nicobar and other parts of the world. They do refer to it as a tractor kachwa, because this does look like the tracks of a tractor. And I'm sure once you get to your university, and you'll find 1,000 tractors around Sonepat, because maybe that's the one vehicle that's there most than any other. And you go and you keep this picture for reference, and you go and track how the tractors track on the roads or on the fields look and be exactly the same. But this is one of the most amazing creatures, and I will show you a picture of this. So this is a mother giant leatherback turtle, and I'm going to take a couple of minutes to dwell on this species and on this family of creatures. So the oceans of the planet have 7 species of sea turtles, which grow from the smallest one grows to about 2 feet in length, to the giant leatherback that can grow up to 7 feet in length. It can weigh up to 700 kilograms in weight. And if there was an award for a gentle giant of the planet, there are many contenders, but I think the giant leatherback would be a very strong contender. So a creature that it's a marine creature, it's a water creature, it spends its entire life in the ocean. So once turtles are born and they go off into the ocean, they don't come back to land at all if they are males. But what's important, and you must have noticed, is that they are born on land. So these thin strips of land that we call beaches on our coastlines, on which we have so much focus for development. We want to go there for our holidays. We want to develop beach resorts. We have our defense projects. We have our road projects. We have our SEZs. What have you are on the coastline. These are those thin strips of land on which this creature, which has been on the planet for at least 150 million years, has to come to nest, has to come every year or every 2 years to dig a little hole in the sand, lay her eggs, and then go back to the ocean. So species that has been there on the planet for 150 million years, if we destroy the beaches in our belief of defense security or economic development or our leisure through tourism, could destroy the ecosystem, the primary ecosystem of a creature, which will then go extinct because there will be no more beaches on which she can actually come and lay her eggs. That's only one dimension to it. So what happens very interestingly is that turtles like this one come to these remote beaches, and all along India's coastline, they have been coming and they come even today. They come in the middle of the night, they haul themselves up to the end of the beach, they dig this little hole in the sand, and you can see a lot of these videos online. I mean, it's full of that. They lay their eggs, they cover it up with soil, and then they go back to the ocean and they forget about it. About 70 days later, the baby turtles, and it's an amazing thing to be, a hugely humbling experience to be able to see that. We have this 6-foot mother who is just nested and gone, and if you're lucky, that same night, another nest of the same turtle has hatched, and you have these little tiny kutti babies, that will fit in the palm of a human hand. They dig themselves out of that nest and they go back straight to the ocean, unguided, unassisted, like they were following their nose. In the middle of the dark night, without any assistance, nature's programming, the DNA, the instinct takes them back straight to the ocean. And I would like you to kind of just, for a moment, close your eyes and stand on an ocean coast. Imagine a dark night. There is no more darkness in our nights, by the way. And I don't know how many of you know, light pollution in the nights is becoming one of our biggest crises. It is affecting human rhythms, natural rhythms, but it is affecting the rhythms of a large number of creatures who require the pitch darkness of the night, which is how the planet is supposed to be. But our obsession with light, our obsession with wanting to be active throughout the night, but that's another story. If you stand on the coastline, and for a moment, I don't know if you can imagine, if you stand on the coastline on a pitch dark night, maybe in the monsoons where dark clouds have covered the skies. If anybody has lived on the coastline, you're probably able to imagine that. The ocean side is still lighter than the land side. Even in the pitch of the night, even on a new moon night full of clouds. Now, what the baby turtles are following, and just imagine, it is the light of the stars reflected on the surface of the water. The difference between the light side and the dark side, that is the primary clue that the baby turtle follows to go into the ocean and not towards the land. The light of the stars reflected on the surface of the water. Can you imagine how small that difference of light might be? And imagine now, if you look at what we are doing to our coastlines, the lighting that we are doing up, the development that we are bringing. And it is not a surprise that there are many, many cases where turtles are completely disoriented and they go into the wrong direction because they are following that light. They are following the light of the stars reflected on the surface of the water of the ocean. Even if you put a torchlight on that beach, all those turtles will congregate on that torchlight as if their life depends on it, because their life does depend on it. They have been programmed by nature to follow where the light is, and the light is the stars reflected on the surface of the ocean. That is the fragility and the vulnerability that we're talking about. And imagine that is the natural course of things. Imagine what's happening when we do our so-called development. And there are many, many things that go with the climate change discussion. We won't go there because I'm already at 8:40 and I would like to move on to the next steps. But keep that in mind. Other very fascinating creatures. This is a bird known as the Nicobar Megapod. It is a bird that does not build a conventional nest. It makes a mound of earth. It digs up a mound of earth as its nest, and it lays the eggs inside that mound of earth. And like the domestic chicken, it does not incubate the eggs. It is the heat of the sun and the heat of the rotting matter in that material and the mud that incubates the eggs. But the interesting part about this bird, it has to still ensure that the temperature around the eggs is right. Yeah, because otherwise the eggs won't incubate. We know that they require certain temperature. So this bird is also called the thermometer bird. There is some kind of rough sensor in its beak whereby it can assess what the temperature around the eggs is, and it's constantly checking the temperature and it will either add material or take off material around the eggs to ensure that the incubation temperature is right. Amazing behavior. And the other very interesting thing about the bird is this bird is found only in the Nicobar Islands and nowhere else on the planet. It is found on 6 of the Nicobar Islands of the 180 Nicobar Islands and nowhere else on the planet. It's called the Nicobar Megapod. This is a feature in nature called endemism, and I'm sure that will come up in your class, where creatures are restricted to certain geographies of the planet. They're not found everywhere. So that's why it becomes unique. That's why that geography and that creature becomes unique. So we have hundreds of species of these very unique creatures in the islands, which are found only in the Andaman and Nicobar. In some cases, only on one island in the entire island chain. It's not even like they are found on 20 islands. There's a bird called the Narcondam hornbill that's found on only one island, which is the island of Narcondam. Now, this is a picture that I mean, maybe this class here, at least those who have joined, may not be much aware of. But in the islands, there are human communities. I'm coming to that aspect. A community known as the Jarawa, for instance. You can see that the dark complexion of the skin is almost like they came out of Africa. I'm just making this very simple. It's far more complicated. But in these islands, we have had human communities living for 30, 40,000 years. They are these nomadic hunting gatherer communities that roam around the forest, that hunt for wild pig and monitor lizard, and they collect honey and they fish on the coastline. And they have lived lives what we typically understand as primitive, as pre-modern, as the Stone Age tribal communities that, for example, don't have salt and sugar and oil in their food. They eat food that is cooked, roasted, or boiled, or raw. And that's one very simplistic example of that. But the story of the last 150 years of these islands after the British came is of a complete marginalization of these communities. So communities that have lived here for 40,000 years, they may not actually exist at all in the next 100 years. Their culture is being wiped out. Their forests are being destroyed. They're losing out in the power hierarchy to people like you and me. Many of us believing that these people are illiterate and junglis and uncivilized, and we have to teach them how they have to lead their lives. And it can be there can be questions at many levels, and maybe at some other point we can discuss some of the more specifics. And I would urge you to try and understand and read more about tribal communities, about Adivasi communities, about what are called Aboriginal communities, because they live lives very different from the way that we lead lives. Their understanding of the planet, their right on the resources is being violated. And I'll just give you one example of another community in these islands called the Great Andamanese, who look very similar to the Jarawa people here. When the British came there and they did a census in the 1850s, they counted about 5,000-6,000 people. So that's not a very large population, but it's still very large by the standards of the lives that they live, because they don't build houses in the way that we do. They are moving around the forest. So generally it is believed that the forest then there's a restriction on how many people there can be, and there's an inbuilt system. But in 1850, there were 5,000 to 7,000 people in that one community. Today, there are only 50 people in that community. So in the last 150 years, a combination of disease, a combination of changed habits, a combination of loss of habitat, a combination of loss of culture has meant that a very viable human community has almost been pushed to extinction. There's a lot we can learn from them, but we won't go there. The point I want to make is that this is a part of that socio-cultural context, which is very central to the identity of the place. Just like different ecologies and geologies will have different sets of people wherever we go, for that matter. I will go to this. So I've given you some idea of the ecology of the place, a very, 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 very snapshot sense of the people of the place. The people of the place are not just the indigenous people, but there are people who have also been there in the last 150 years, people from all over India. The islands are considered a melting pot, different cultures coming together. And they have their own challenges, they have their own limitations, but they are located within that geology and that ecology. That is the point I want to make. Like I'm sitting in Bombay on the coastline, and I have to be aware of the reality of this place. It is pouring here. I mean, it's unbelievable. Somebody from Delhi to come and if you live on the coastline like Bombay, you won't believe the kind of rain that falls here day after day after day. and that is the reality. We have to acknowledge that. I come now to the third and the more very interesting part is the geology of the place. Okay, and there's a little backstory here. Is that, and we go back to the tsunami and the earthquake. So I'm assuming that all of you are aware of that earthquake and tsunami of 2004. And we all remember 2004 by the tsunami that was caused, often forgetting the earthquake that caused the tsunami, because without an earthquake, there is not going to be a tsunami. And while many of us, and in most parts of the world, the damage was by the tsunami, these huge waves that came and crashed into the coastline on unsuspecting people, and hundreds of thousands of people died. What happened in places like the Andaman and Nicobar Islands was, doubly interesting. And that is where the geology kind of took place. The geology played up a role. And if you can see my image, and if you can see my hand, maybe I'm a small window somewhere. But if you look at my hand, and let's assume that this is the Andamans in the north. If you remember the map I showed you, and you can see the map on the left-hand side. And at my elbow here, where you can see my finger is the Nicobars running north to south. And the Port Blair is roughly in the middle. What happened in the morning of December 26, 2004, when the tsunami happened, and before the tsunami, the earthquake happened. You will remember when we were children, we used to play the seesaw in the playgrounds in our cities. One side goes down and one side comes up. That's the fun we have. So the islands, the Andaman and Nicobar Island, actually tilted like a seesaw does in a children's playground. So when the earthquake happened, the Andaman Islands came up that morning by about 5 feet. That's a huge change. And the Nicobar Islands in the south actually submerged by about 15 feet. So a standard house today, a modern house, has a ceiling of about 10 feet. So if you were on the Nicobar coast on the morning of that earthquake, you were standing on your rooftop. The moment the earthquake happened, a few minutes later, your feet would have been in water because the land would have subsided, your house would have gone under, and the sea maintaining its level would have actually come on top of your roof of the house. So that is a phenomenal change that takes place. And that is the reality of the place. That is what caused the damage. That is what caused the huge destruction that took place. And if you look at the maps on the right-hand side in this image, this is an island called Kachal in the middle Nicobar. And before that, I'd like you to just notice this minus 4.25. And here on the top left, you see +1 to +2 meters. So this is an adapted map from work done by a bunch of geologists in the University of Colorado immediately after the earthquake. And I'd done a piece for the Frontline magazine, and we had used that map. This is what they showed. They showed that Indira Point experiences submergence of -4 meters. That's roughly 15 feet. And parts of the Andaman Islands came up by about 1 to 2 meters, which is about 4 to 5 feet. And this is a classical example. So if you understand satellite imagery, what you see as red is land that is exposed. And you will see in the image over here, 21 December 04. And here you will see 26 December 04. So Kachal Island, in which many people died, this land, this area which is red under the yellow circle, which was land on December 21, in the evening on the day the earthquake happened, is actually all underwater. This place, and if you can see this, where I'm circling the numbers in red, saw a submergence of 4 to 7 meters. That's roughly 20 feet of submergence. So anybody on that coastline would have been submerged, and it was almost like the waves came after the submergence happened. So it was a double whammy for these people. This is what actually happened. This is why there was so much damage in this particular place. So this is a picture of the Nicobars taken in 2006 when I was on a survey visit there. And you can see, because this coastline has submerged what was earlier land. Here you can see some coconut plantations. Here you can see some coconut plantations. You can see some paddy fields. All of this forest which was green, or these plantations which were green, are now all brown because they are permanently standing in water. So the ocean has actually extended further because this was low-lying land along the coastline, and this has now submerged. So it's a very significant shift that takes place. So for the first few years when we went to the Nicobar, the entire coastline of these islands would be seen like a wall of brown. Because the trees that were standing above the high tide line were now under water because they had submerged. They were so slowly dying, turning brown, falling off, and we were getting a new coastline. This is a picture that's a very interesting picture. This is of Indira Point, which is the southernmost tip of India. This is a picture which is of pre-2004. So this is the very famous lighthouse of what is known as Indira Point. You will see in this picture that this lighthouse is about 20 feet, 25 feet inside of the coastline. You can see the beach here. You can see this lighthouse standing on land. Today, this is where the lighthouse stands. So what was land over here, if you can see my cursor moving, this beach actually was over here in this particular picture. So all this land has actually submerged, and a lighthouse that was on land is now standing in water. This is a very significant shift that takes place. This is what happened on the other side. This is the northern part I showed you. In the background are the Andaman Islands, one of the Andaman Islands, and a coral reef system that we all know has to be permanently underwater is now permanently uplifted and above water. So this is what's known as the porous of the rock coral. The single boulder is about 5 feet in height. And this gives you an idea of the uplift that has taken place. And you see the old coastline in the background. So while you have actually lost land in the Nicobars, you have created land in the Andamans. So it's like give some, take some. What we'll also see is a new coastline being created, because now 20 years later, this mangrove forest, which requires water every 6 hours or every 8 hours with the changing tides, is not going to receive any more water. So while the coastline forest in the Nicobars died because it was permanently submerged in water, the mangroves will die because they are not getting any water at all. So we'll have these forests die, we'll have the coastline move, maybe we'll have new mangroves develop over here, maybe we'll have new beaches. But that is the system that is constantly taking place. This is the geology of the place. This is the reality that cannot be denied. So this is just a picture of the same thing. I will move on to argue and show you and point out that this happens because there is no other option but for this to happen in this particular way. If you're aware of the geology and the geography of the planet, there is something called the Ring of Fire all along the Pacific Ocean, where we have the maximum number of earthquakes, the largest number of volcanoes, and also where the large number of tsunamis kind of happen. So this coast of North America, Japan, we know is one of the most seismically active countries. Indonesia, Philippines, they all fall in the Ring of Fire, and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands is also part of that Ring of Fire. If I go to the earlier slide, okay, it's not happening, that's fine. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands have an earthquake once a week on an average. Yesterday morning, there was a 6 on the Richter scale earthquake that happened in these islands. The point I want to make is that so it's almost like it's shaking all the time. And like we discussed a geology of the Himalayas or of the Western Ghats or the deserts. This is a reality that we cannot ignore. We cannot plan any kind of development or the development we will plan is going to be problematic if we don't acknowledge for the fact that there is going to be an earthquake. If not today, it will happen tomorrow. If we've not had a tsunami today, there will be a tsunami. If not 10 years from now, there will be a tsunami 20 years from now. So if we are going to do intervention in terms of technology, in terms of development, if we do not acknowledge for these 3 realities, I go back to the earlier proposition of the geological reality, of the ecological reality, and of the socio-cultural reality, we will damage 1 or 2 or 3 of these all at the same time. You intervene in the geological dimension, or you don't acknowledge for the geological dimension. You build a port on the coastline, you put up a settlement on the coastline. When the storm comes, or when the earthquake happens, or when the tsunami happens, that entire settlement is going to be very, very badly impacted. And this will apply in different ways to different systems, depending on the vulnerability and fragility of that particular place. In some places, it might be more water. In a place of the desert, it is less water. So you cannot intervene in a desert, for example, by pumping in water and converting it into the green revolution of what we are seeing in Punjab and Haryana and Rajasthan. The changes that have taken place in those ecosystems are staggering. These are stories that we are not told. Because a desert ecosystem cannot actually do with more water. Waterlogging, stagnation, changing of the ecosystem, all of these things happen. And the agriculture that looked very prosperous for 15, 20 years then starts to die out as well. So when we intervene in ecosystems, we have to be aware of the reality of those ecosystems. A desert is dry for certain reasons. It would have been a forest otherwise. It cannot deal with too much water. Similarly, on the coastline, you cannot make an argument, and which is made when, say, dams are built, that river water is going waste to the sea. That's why we need to use the water. No, river waters don't go waste to the sea. When river waters enter the sea, they create very conducive ecosystems. They create systems where mangroves can survive, where certain species of fishes can survive. When we block the water, in the argument that water goes waste to the sea, we destroy the entire ecosystem downstream of the dam. The estuaries, the coastline, the mangrove forests, all of that get destroyed. So we might want to intervene, but we have to be aware of the fact that there are implications. Let me move on to a. So Sneha, how much? It's already 9 o'clock. Can I take another 15 minutes?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Or I've already overshot my time.
No, we can go by 15 minutes.
Okay. So I will come to certain completely different dimensions of the story. When I started working in the island, I was about 25 years old and 28 years old maybe. And among the first things that I came across was this one report called a report for development of the island that was published in 1964-65. And I want to link this up to what some of the things that I saw, some things that angered me and kind of propelled me to work as an activist in these islands. But also what I realized subsequently was the importance of language. And, sometimes we forget that language is not objective. Language conceals and reveals a very deep value systems in what words we choose to use, in the way that we use language, in the way that we use images. They are also revealing a lot more than what is evident on the surface. And I'll give you 2 or 3 examples from this, because they perform a role in the way that we understand places and we understand what is happening there. So there was this 100-page report that was the setting up of the development for these islands. And when I looked it up, what I found very shocking was, for instance, there was a chapter called Colonization. And it struck me then as a much younger person that, this was a report in 1964. India had been a colony of the British till less than 20 years before that. We became free only in 1947. And within 15 years, there was a section of our population, of our elite, of the policymakers in Delhi, that are talking talking the language of colonization. They're using the same terminologies. They're using the same terms. So it's almost like the British were colonizing India, and then India is starting to colonize these frontier areas. And as a matter of fact, a reviewer writing a review of my book that I spoke did mention that and says that this seems like a second colonization that happened for these islands. And colonization need not be necessarily on the frontiers physically. It can happen in many ways. But to use that language, I think, betrays a certain value system that we might consider problematic and we need to think about. Because these are not empty spaces. Yeah, we've just seen, this is a space with million years of history of geology, of ecology, of people that have been living here for 40,000 years. I said in the beginning, how would we look at the place, or how would we look at the world, or how would we think if we were an island? What would an island think like? What would the world look like if I was a turtle? Would I want to colonize that place? How would I treat it? How would the world look to me? Would I not be the center of my universe if I was a tribal in that island, or if I was a turtle on that island, for instance? So that was one. The other very shocking example was referring to these forests as infested by the people who have been there for 40,000 years. And I haven't gone into those details. In 60s and even today, the Jarawas have special constitutional status. They are human beings. They are communities of this country. The Indian Constitution gave them special rights. There is 1,000 square kilometer forest, the best forest in the islands, that is protected as a Jarawa tribal reserve. And these people are referred to in the 60s as infesting the forest, as forests being infested by the Jarawas. And here I just want to just think about it. The moment we say infestation, our reaction is of eliminating the infestation. A fly is an infestation. A virus is an infestation. A mosquito is an infestation. We want to eliminate it. And that's how language performs. Now, if we just thought about it and said, if they had said Jarawa inhabited forests, then the way we look at this completely changes. We look at them as people inhabiting that forest, not as infestations that need to be thrown away. And if we went a step further and I said Jarawa owned forests, yeah, then the way we look at that changes completely. Oh, these people own these forests are theirs. And this is a very, very important thing, because the moment we use language in the way that we do, it creates images for other people, it creates ideas for other people who are engaging with what we write, with what we show. And that becomes very, very important, because this kind of language, this kind of framing of a development idea then sets in motion a set of steps that sometimes have no going back. In another island, the same report in the 60s, you see this quadrilateral. This is among the finest tropical forests that we find even today in India. This report went and said this 10,000 acres of forest, we should clear fell. It's as if they have no value. This island also was the inhabitation of another tribal community that again has tribal rights. This forest, this entire island was a tribal reserve in the 60s. But there was this high part committee that thought it was okay to say that you can just go and clear fell 10,000 acres of forest on this particular island. So it betrays a lack of knowledge, it betrays ignorance, it betrays arrogance, which continues even today. And just to some examples of that, kind of setting in motion an idea of development. I'm only giving you one picture, but there could be other ways we can look at it, but this is a reality we can't deny. This is a picture of the same island that I just showed you in the earlier picture. This is one of my most favorite pictures in 25 years of photography. I've done a lot of photography. This is the simplest picture I've taken, and I don't think I certainly cannot take a better picture than this, because it is just so simple. It just tells you the whole story. This is a full-grown elephant in a timber yard in this particular island. Look at the diameter of this timber. Imagine the scale of the tree that this timber has come from. Imagine what life must have been there in the tree. Imagine the age of the tree. Imagine that forest, and then see what happens. It happens because we think that forest is for us to go and do what we want. We think of it as what is considered as terra nullius, empty space, where we deny the existence of everything. And I'm not even saying forest, I'm even talking of people who've been there for so many thousand years. Coastal development. You mine away the sand of the beach, you cut down the forest, the sea starts to erode, you have to protect your productive assets on this side. So you start building a wall that is using sand, ironically, from another beach, and you get into a vicious cycle. You think the sand is just there for you to take away. And this is a large problem on India's coastline, on mainland coastline. We are building these seawalls left, right, and center mindlessly. It is an invitation to disaster. It is going to destroy the coastal systems. It will destroy the beaches. It will destroy the livelihoods. And most importantly, it will not protect us, because a vertical wall will not be able to stop the ocean from coming in. And these are just some examples. I just want to go back to the earlier one. So I just want to kind of finish here quickly, is that if the islands were Jarawa infested in the 50s and 60s, what are they today? And that's the question that we have to ask, because it's a question of today's time. Then I just want to give this one example to argue that we've not gone very far. And if I would argue so, we've actually gone in the wrong direction. So here you have a 2014 article by a very prominent commentator writing in Hindustan Times, referring to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands as a prized piece of mid-ocean real estate. Yeah. Now we all know what real estate is. Yeah. All our houses are built on real estate. And I'm not denying the importance of that. But when land becomes real estate, it's a way of looking at land that then does not allow for any other value to that land. So when the islands become a piece of mid-ocean real estate, it does not matter that a million-year-old creature nests on those beaches. It does not matter that these are the most unique forests on the planet. It will not matter that there are creatures on those islands that are not found anywhere on the planet. It does not matter that there will be people there who have been living there for thousands of years. And my suggestion to all of us, my plea is, we have to relook at this way that we're looking at the world. because we're looking from a Delhi or a Sonepat or a Bombay. These are far away areas. These are the fringes. These are the peripheries. But if I was in that island, if I was that turtle, if I was that Adivasi, that is the center of my world. That is not the fringe of your world. You are the fringe of my existence. And that's something very, very important to keep in mind. Otherwise, all these lands will be just for us to exploit in our quest for this elusive, unnecessary superpower status that countries like India are aspiring for. We want to be an economic superpower. We want to be a military superpower. We want to be a cultural superpower. What for? What is this superpower business? What is this superpowerness, I want to ask? And it's something we have to think about, because many human communities, many cultural communities, many ecological communities are paying a huge price for something that's not actually going to give us much. I've been writing more recently about this massive plan of the Niti Aayog to develop port projects and huge projects in these islands, very deeply problematic. I just want to give an example of this bay in Great Nicobar, which was a turtle sanctuary till 3 months ago. It is the same turtle on, it's the same beach on which that giant leatherback comes to nest that I spoke to you about. And the picture I showed you was from this beach over here. Turtles nesting on these beaches, yeah, have been satellite tracked by scientists in Bangalore, and they have been found swimming 10,000 kilometers from these islands to Madagascar and to Australia. And we want to put in a port over here that will completely destroy one of the most important giant leatherback nesting sites in the northern Indian Ocean. The giant leatherbacks nest only in the Andaman and Nicobar in India. They don't nest on any of our other beaches. It's in this island. This idea of economic development, this idea of achieving something is going to force us to pay the price of something that is so precious. I won't go into the details of this. This is the port plan. There's a 3-kilometer wide bay opening that I showed you, which the turtles use to swim into and nest on this 2-kilometer wide beach. Spectacular beach, one of the most amazing beaches. They want to build, because they have to a port, they have to build a breakwater. A 3-kilometer opening for the turtle will be left only 300 meters. And actually, scientists and others have said that turtles will be able to swim through this and reach the nesting sites. Is that really possible? Is it not the destruction of this entire system of turtles that have been nesting here for God alone knows thousands of years? Turtles swimming from here to places as far as Madagascar. And I mean, if you look at the basic economics, also it's not going to work of this port project. But I'm using this as an illustration of what we are going to be doing in this particular place. And I want to kind of wrap up with something that's even more spectacularly problematic. So this is highlighted from an article that I did for the EPW. What you see highlighted in what's that color, magenta or purple. In 2009, in a defense seminar in Port Blair, 5 years after the biggest earthquake and tsunami in living human history, there was a defense seminar in Port Blair, and our former President Kalam, the very respected President Kalam, the late President Kalam, in his vision for the islands, proposed a 250 megawatt nuclear power station in these islands, in an island system that has seen 9.3 earthquake on the Richter scale. An earthquake of that magnitude actually generates more energy than many nuclear bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This was an earthquake that happened in the Andaman and Nicobar waters. You know, hundreds of thousands of people died in that earthquake and tsunami. And here you have somebody who comes and says, in that landscape, in one of the world's most seismically active zones, you want to put a nuclear power station. So, with due respects, I have serious problems with the vision that the former president of India had. Not many people might agree with me, but I think it is critical that we have to create a culture of questioning. We have to create a culture where we stand up and say, we do not agree. This might be the most important politician, might be the most important scientist, might be the president of the country. There is a problem here. What is this vision that we are striving for? What is this vision that does not acknowledge, does not account for the geological realities, the ecological realities, and the socio-cultural realities? Imagine what will happen if there was another tsunami in these islands, because a tsunami will happen. You know, a foreign nation may not attack us, but an earthquake will happen, a tsunami will happen. And what will this achieve is a question that we have to deeply, deeply ask. And this is exactly what's happening across the landscape, across our ecosystems. And it is this disturbance, this upsetting of the balance of the tripod, of not acknowledging the realities, that these very fragile systems are going to be made more vulnerable. Yeah. And I'm going to, there was another point, but maybe we can take it up. It's a little more complex. It's about how different people have conceptualized technology. And I will just speak about a very prominent scholar called Sheila Jasanoff, who talks of the technologies of hubris, of which a nuclear power plant is a very interesting example, and technologies of humility. This is a very different way of understanding technology, or what technology should do. What is science and technology? And what it can do, what it does, and how it can be reimagined. And for the class which is just getting into your first year's BA, this might be a little complex, but I would urge you to be open to re-looking at some of these things, even in technology society relationships, certainly in the way that we look at our planet. Because really, you know, we keep saying that the older generations have failed the younger ones, and I am now that older generation. You can see my white hair and if I show you the back of my head, I'm balding like many of your professors would be. The future is with you, because you have to make the decisions, and I'm sure you've heard this many times, but your future is at stake, and you have to stand up. And you know, actually, some of the most important environmental battles being fought today in the world and in India are the youth. You know, Greta Thunberg is an excellent example. There's a whole network of Fridays for the Future in India, which I have been interacting. They've invited me to speak. The questions that they are raising are not the questions that people like me are raising. And that's where the hope is, and that's where the future is. So you don't necessarily have to listen to all of us. You have to chart the future, because, you know, all you folks, sometimes I think know better than we do. And I really mean that very, very seriously. So let me just finish. This is just to show the books that I've done. There's actually a Kannada translation of my novel. I did a novel in the Andamans. If anybody of you would like to read fiction, do read that one. If anybody reads Kannada, even fantastic. And I have this new book that Sneha mentioned. It's just a little 1,000-word story on turtle nesting in these islands. It's beautifully, beautifully illustrated by somebody called Vipin Sketchflow. And if you get a chance to get the book, get it for the illustration, not for the story. I'll finish here. This is a Yahoo, not a Yahoo group, but a listserv that I run on the Andamans. If you're interested, this is my email ID. These are my the books that I've done. And my apologies, I've really taken very long, at least 15 minutes longer than I should have. But thanks a lot for this opportunity. I hope I've been able to communicate to you at least the importance of that fragility and that vulnerability. Maybe the axis is something, the 3 axes we can throw out of the window. But with that, I will stop here. Thanks a ton for having me over, and I'd really love to hear back with all your questions and critiques and perhaps challenges and dismissal of many things that I have outlined. Thank you very much, Sneha, Professor Raj, Cosmin, the entire team at the university. And I'm now open to do what you want with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pankaj. This was like a mesmerizing talk. Before I come with any questions or more points to discuss, I would actually check with Professor Raj, Professor Sridhar, Cosmin, and Armin as well, who has joined us in the last part of your talk, if you all have anything to add.
Can you and just hang on for a moment? I'm just going to get a glass of water.
Sure. Please do.
Please don't say anything, because I'll miss what you're saying. I'll just get back in a moment.
Sure, we will do that. Hi, Armin. You're on mute, Armin. So, Professor Sridhar, you can speak next, and like if Professor Raj, if you have anything to add, and then
I'm back. Yes, please.
Yes, hi.
Okay, I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Armin.
Okay, well, Professor Saksaria was brilliant in his presentation. it's important to alert all the people participating in this conference, but also others elsewhere in the world. Not only do we have all these challenges, but we have an opportunity to respond. So rather than be overwhelmed by the bleakness of these issues, including nuclear devastation, and I should add all kinds of environmental setbacks, climate change impacts that we are only beginning to address. But it's an opportunity for all of us, and especially for young people, to get involved. Young people, in fact, are in the foreground of the climate change effort. They're all the virtually, well, most of the climate change litigation has come from young people who are bringing the issue to the attention of their communities and the world in general, to try to get governments to behave more rationally and progressively on these issues. So, you know, young people are going to lead the way in all of these major areas: nuclear issues, climate change, environmental degradation. These are issues that the young people, first of all, are going to be deeply affected by, because their lives are going to be led in the context of these issues, and they are the ones who are going to be suffering from them. So it's quite understandable that we would expect young people to be involved in responding with their minds, their hearts, their feet, to get to answers to these questions. Thank you very much.
You're on
Okay.
mute, Professor Raj. We can't hear you yet. Thank you, Ram.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, Dr. Pankaj, thank you very much for that fascinating talk with a lot of experiences that you've shared from your own work at Andaman Nicobar Islands. What I wanted to ask you was that one of the big challenges that developed and developing countries are facing is, how do you balance the issue relating to, you know, using the natural habitat for effectively contributing to the larger goals of human development, while ensuring that we maintain the fragility of the ecosystem. So effectively, my question as a non-expert in this field is that, is it the case that islands like the Hawaii Islands, maybe Maldives, Phuket, Bali, which have all become tourism destinations and have been also able to maintain a fair amount of economic as well as environmental fragility in that sense, are differently situated than Andaman Nicobar Islands, that we cannot see these islands through the prism of what has happened in other places? Are there uniquely different dimensions to the ANN which will not lend itself to such an imagination?
Maybe I kind of take some of these questions together. Is that okay? I can respond perhaps, or I can also try and respond at one at a time. What do you say, Sneha?
Pankaj, you can directly respond to and then I read out the comments and then we can do it.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, I mean, I want to thank Armin for, I think, first that point of, yeah, I realize I end up being guilty of painting this, often this bleak picture, and then, we are left with, now what do we do? So, Armin, thank you very much, because it's certainly not, having said that, I do realize I end up painting that picture, but it is not to say that there is no hope, because I think there's a lot that can be done. And like he very rightly said, it's being led today by young people. So thanks for pointing that out. One need not be upset. I think it's important, and that's partly my response to Raj also, is that I don't have the answer to the question of what is the right balance. And to be very honest, and it might be a simple answer, I'm not looking for that balance. I don't see that as my job. And I would also seek your forgiveness, you and everybody, if I say that, because maybe at some point it's also my responsibility. But I think what is more important than the answers is the questions that we are asking. And my broader understanding is that we are not asking enough questions. We are not asking different types of questions. We are not asking questions of ourselves. We are not asking questions of the people who matter. We are not asking questions of people in power. Because why is it that is the question that we ask? What is the other question that we should be asking? So when we say, for instance, human well-being or development, we have assumed, and this is a very simplistic answer, we have assumed that development of a particular kind. Can we imagine a different development? Can we imagine a different way of being? Because when we start to question that, I think that is when we will reimagine our world. And because it cannot be done in a day, it has to be a small and slow process. Where the other island systems in specific are concerned, I think, again, I'm not sure that they have attained the kind of things that the stories told to us actually communicate. We do not know of probably the tragedies that have been faced by those ecosystems and those people, because nobody's telling us those stories. And I find what's very important is, I think, the bearing witness role. I think it's becoming increasingly important to be able to tell people that there is another reality, which for various reasons, and there's no point blaming anybody, I think we are part of that problem. So for me, for instance, one of my most amazing experiences with my book, The Islands in Flux, is actually getting an email from an unknown person, a British journalist, filmmaker, who was in the islands. And I just got this email out of suddenly somewhere about 2 years ago, saying, I came to the islands looking for a paradise that was sold to me. And I happened to read your book, and I don't want to come to this place anymore. Because, and I feel extremely, I feel bad about that, because that is a beautiful place. But the stories that I am narrating are stories nobody has told him, nobody is willing to tell. And these are the hidden stories that I think we have to document. And once the stories are there, once the communication is there, I think people will respond, systems will respond. And I don't want to sit in the position of giving answers. I'm finding increasingly the importance and the difficulty of raising questions in the country today and in the climate that we are. So in some sense, I'm not answering your question, Raj, but I'm also answering it because we have to go beyond, I think, the question of what the answer is. The question for me is, what is the question that we're asking? And the answers will come.
Yeah. Thank you. Just in the interest of time, if I can request Professor Sridhar to give his remarks and then take questions from the audience.
I will speak less, I promise.
No, that's okay, Pankaj.
Thank you so much, Professor Sneha, and welcome everyone. Such a delight listening to Professor Pankaj. A very interesting and captivating talk, I must say, taking us through the wonder and beauty of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Well, that's one of the essential elements. Many of us, at least to me personally, I do have a limited understanding of the history and geography of the place. But today it's indeed a great learning experience, and also in a way reminded me of two things. One, the wonderful work by Ruskin Bond, the bond of nature. So this is something in a metaphoric manner connected to that. And the most important lesson, taking inspiration from what Milton wrote many years ago, Paradise Lost. So, in case we do not take care of our environment, then there is not going to be a sustainable future. And one of the significant aspects of even Professor Pankaj's talk is he illustrated a range of issues pertaining to ecology and environment, very well interspersed with matters in relation to ornithology, anthropology, and history. And this so very well even symbolizes the kind of work and curricular activities that are undertaken both at the OP Jindal Global University and also at the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability, which happens to be our ninth school set up in 2020. So all I can say is one, a very big thanks to Professor Pankaj for this excellent talk, and also taking off from here, congratulating our incoming students to the BA Honors in Environment and Sustainability at the JSES, and all our returning students of this program and the faculty members. And our students can expect much more from the illustrious faculty members teaching at the School of Environment and Sustainability, and also can draw in from the resources from the other schools at the JGU, because the matters that we have been discussing this evening, or what you're going to study at the School of Environment and Sustainability, they could just not left to one particular discipline. So there are going to be other legal issues pertaining to that, or even the policy aspects pertaining to those issues. So you will have an enriching experience, but nonetheless, you need to take the fullest advantage of your study and times at the JSCS under the leadership of Professor Armin and his very well accomplished faculty members. And even to help you induct into the school, already pre-semester immersion training and engagement program was convened, which will soon be followed by a university resource orientation program as well, which I'm sure is going to set you off on a very good academic trajectory as you begin your classes on the 16th of August, albeit in an online mode, unfortunately, due to the pandemic situation. But however, the entire positive side to the pandemic situation is that today we presume even your parents, your friends, relatives, and all had an opportunity to attend the commencement lecture of the JSCS. So many issues to handle, to study, read, and research upon, because we cannot find instant or even immediate solutions to worldly problems, but we need to raise questions and map our approaches, as the speaker had mentioned this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Sridhar. Due to some network issues, we don't have Pankaj with us in the final few minutes, but that allows us to actually have Cosmin talk to our students. We few questions, not many, but if Pankaj is able to join, then I'll take them. But till then, I'll just have it over to Cosmin. Sorry.
Well, thank you very much, Sneha. I'm not sure if I should start by thanking Pankaj, who is not here, for his wonderful presentation. However, it was a roller coaster of information, and for a person like me who actually studied the sinking islands for the last 20 years or so, this Pandora box of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, it's actually something extremely attractive. And I hope our students, the new students and the old students, we can call them old students, the second year students, who will actually follow up this topic and eventually deepen that. the roller coaster, obviously, I mean, for Heraclitus, who said that the only change is constant, the only thing that is constant is change. I'm sorry. This talk was memorizing, and we are looking forward to further collaboration with Pankaj, with Professor Pankaj, and to see him again at the JSES at GGU. And talking to our students and to our larger communities of people who are actually very active and interested in environmental issues and ecosystems. I would like also in the name of JSES to thank our Vice Chancellor, Professor Rasi Kumar, for his wonderful introduction and his participation in this commencement lecture. It is always a pleasure, sir, to have us with us, and your words are always resting with us. Professor the Patnaik, our registrar from GGU, whom our students, unfortunately, for not being yet in campus, will not interfere so much, but definitely when everyone will be returning to Sonipat, Professor Sridhar will definitely be there. And we thank him so much for his intervention in our talk. And obviously, the last but not the least, Professor Armin, our Dean, Professor Armin Rosenkrantz, who is it's our lighthouse at JCS. I'm sorry, I'm even emotional when I'm talking about Armin. And we are looking forward to attending his classes. And obviously, as already been said so many times, we are welcoming the new students from the 2021 batch and the old students, the returning students for our second year. And we are all looking, our GSES and GGU in general, but in particular, the faculty from GSES is looking forward to meeting them in class. We're gonna see you online for now, starting in a week or so. But we will gonna follow closely your experience and more your development at our school and your engagement in environmental issues. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Thank you, Patney, although Professor Pankaj, I apologize for not being here. So, yes, thank you so much, and it was a great experience.
So, Cosben and Sneha, while Pankaj may be joining us, I want to raise a very interesting question that Pankaj has raised to all of us. This could be a part of a debate in your school. Should the responsibility of intellectuals be to raise questions or also to provide answers as well? Because this is a very important debate, both in terms of what universities should be doing and to what extent universities have a role to respond to the public policy challenges as well. Of course, Pankaj is raising an equally important question, which is that some questions are not raised. And I suppose he means that as well. It's not that he, as an academic, he doesn't want to provide answers. He says that because the preoccupation of many is to provide answers, some of the important questions don't get asked and we need to ask it. But from where I am also looking at is, intellectuals have also been critiqued by many people who are out there doing things, rightly or not so rightly, that they don't have enough, let's say, direction or perspectives or approaches to do what is the right thing to do. And I think there are probably fewer fields which this is most reflected, which is the area of environment. So as we thank and celebrate Pankaj's contribution to the commencement lecture, he also raises a very important question, and I want to bring that question back to the school itself, that what ought to be the responsibility of academics and intellectuals and even students is to, while raising important questions, should they also be responding to those questions as well? I think I see Pankaj back. He has overcome the Wi-Fi challenges and he's joined us, it seems. Any closing comments as we, I suppose we are winding up and we are kind of debating and discussing your lecture.
Yes, sorry, Pankaj, for losing you, but over to you. I think we did have some questions about turtles and about significance of water and the landscape of Andaman Nicobar and how storytelling is part of their culture, and some other questions about the link between tourism and the Andaman popularity of Andaman Islands and how does it affect the economy. But I don't know if we have enough time to do justice to these questions, which our students are already asking, inspired by Professor Raj's push to ask questions. But I would leave the remaining minutes for you to wrap up, Pankaj. I think we are really grateful, and we hope that this gives us an opportunity to interact more with you and bring in more opportunities for joint research and work with your students, and our students will get to learn from your team and the work that you do. And Pankaj, over to you for final comments.
I think I did hear Raj was saying towards the end, and I absolutely agree with both the critique in a sense, which is an important one, and the challenge that he has thrown out to all of us. And yeah, there are various ways to respond to that, and I will not try and respond because I don't think I'm even equipped. It's very important to keep in mind that yes, we do need. Is it good enough to just raise questions? I think it's a very valid question, and there is no running away from that. There's no doubt about that. And I think he's put it across very well as a challenge for all of us, both in terms of policy, in terms of intellectual activity.
Oh, I think we lost him again.
Pankaj, we lost your volume for a moment.
And you're on mute now, Pankaj. Yeah, it's here in Mumbai, so the network.
I know. Well, yeah, it was really nice of him to have been able to. We got the whole lecture uninterrupted. That was pretty good.
You're mute, Pankaj. You're on mute.
Yeah, before it locks off. So I mean, this is the fragility of the
Right.
Indian IIT system. If this is, I mean, nobody can be blamed. So if you're thinking this country go completely virtual, we
I
know
know.
challenges are going to be. So, and particularly for education, I think so.
Absolutely.
We have to be aware of. I mean, in some sense, the bottlenecks of technology, which we also need. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, so on that, whatever ironic note, might I? I'm on again. No, I'm not. Okay. All right. Before I get kicked out, I'll just say thank you. And yeah, we'll say a proper goodbye. Thank you very much at the school here, at the university, and all the best to the students and all of you.
Thank you very much, Pankaj. So good to see you and hope to welcome you to our campus sometime.
Thank you so much, Pankaj. Thank you, Professor Raj.